I'm assuming that the beginning of it you guys got.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't be talking about how confusing it is. Let me try to explain. No, we're good. So secant's 1 over cosine, tangent is sine over cosine. We're good there? Same denominator, so we'll combine it into one fraction. Okay there? Yesterday at this point, we squared both sides. We said, all right, let's try squaring both sides. But what we did yesterday was we multiplied this out. We did the square double square thingy on the 1 minus sine squared, or 1 minus sine of x squared. Let's not multiply it out for a minute and see what happens. We already know what happens, but that's the thought. So we'll wait for a minute. We squared both sides, so we squared that, and then when we squared this, the square root of 3 squared is 3, and 3 squared is 9, so 3 over 9 is 1/3. Okay there? Questions so far? Yep.
So when it's 1 over the 1 and the sine and over cosine, I thought we were supposed to move the cosine to the other side.
We could.
Because okay, that's where I got stuck.
Well, and that's why we changed it, because if you do it, you kind of get stuck a little bit, and you could. It would probably work itself out eventually, but I think this is easier. But what you're doing there is not wrong. I don't know if that helps, but so we changed then the cosine squared to 1 minus sine squared. And then now that we have 1 minus sine squared, guess what we can do with 1 minus sine squared? Factor. So 1 minus sine squared becomes 1 minus sine times 1 plus sine. And now we have a 1 minus sine and we have a 1 minus sine to the second power. So we can cancel the 1 minus sines here. So the top ends up with 1 minus sine. This cancels on the bottom, we have 1 plus sine, which suddenly makes it a lot easier. Go.
So why isn't it the top 1 plus sine? Because when you factor
Well,
it out,
now remember, there's a difference between 1 minus sine of x squared. Because what does 1 minus, when we square both sides here, or I'm sorry, I said both sides. Yeah, both sides. When we squared this, we get 1 minus sine times 1 minus sine. Yes?
Yeah.
And 1 minus sine times 1 minus sine is 1 minus sine squared. So when we cancel a 1 minus sine,
God,
we're left with a 1 minus sine.
Oh, because the exponent of they subtract.
Well, what does 1 minus sine squared mean? And if we cancel a 1 minus sine with a 1 minus sine, yeah, then the top is still a 1 minus sine.
Why are we allowed to do that though with the bottom? Because it wouldn't make sense if you just factor the bottom.
If we factor the bottom in what?
Because like 1 minus sine squared x, how can that be factorable?
How would you factor?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? All right. At this point, since we're getting there, now we just have a proportion. We have one fraction equals another fraction. And if we have one fraction equals another fraction, then we can just cross multiply. So we do 3 times 1 minus sine of x gives us 3 minus 3 sine of x. We do 1 plus sine of x times 1, which gives us 1 plus sine of x. Add the 3 sine of x, subtract the 1, divide 4. So once we get to here, it's all algebra.
Are you just multiplying under a single?
No, we're cross multiplying. So we're doing, remember if we had something like x over 4 equals 2/7, we just do that, and we get 7x equals 8. That's what we did right there. Is that? No. I mean, more like multiplying by 4 to get rid of, I mean, basically, we're multiplying both sides by the LCD in a way. But it's a lot easier to say cross multiply. So the bottom of this times the top of that, bottom of that times the top of that, gives us that. Sine of x equals 1/2. If the sine of x equals 1/2, then x has to be pi over 6, 30 degrees. Since it's positive, we're also talking second quadrant. So pi over 6, second quadrant, there's pi, right? Pi over 6 is going to be that. So it's going to be pi
Thank you everyone for your
minus pi over
participation in
6.
today's lockdown drill. We are now clear. Your room should have been unlocked by this point. If not, we are all clear. Thank you so much.
I think that was the trick. We actually are still supposed to be locked down. Okay. And so pi, which remember pi is going to be 6 pi over 6. So 6 pi over 6 minus pi over 6 gives us 5 pi over 6. Is this a but we're not done yet? Or is it a question on what we've done?
Well, do we have to check since we didn't like open up the size 1 minus x squared?
How do we get from here to here?
Squared.
As soon as we square both sides, that says, oh, we might have created something that we shouldn't have. So we do have to check it. And in the interest of time, I'm going to tell you, pi over 6, all good. 5 pi over 6, not so much good. And that's a sign issue. Secant of pi over 6, cosine of pi over 6 is square root of 3 over 2. So secant of it is 2 over square root of 3, which becomes 2 root 3 over 3. Tangent of pi over 6, tangent of 30 degrees is root 3 over 3. So 2 root 3 over 3 minus root 3 over 3 gives us root 3 over 3, which is exactly what we're supposed to get. But when we put it in 5 pi over 6,